I wanted to just share a little bit about some of those things. Um, Definitely a much deeper awareness of my life and a lot more connection to my heart and a recognition that a man without heart is not a man that can change the world. It's a man that confirms everything about what he believed about it initially.
Mm.
Heart is defiant to what you've experienced. And it's very interesting that people don't know that, is that it functions in defiance of a world that tells you A, B, and C. And the mind, you could even say, is very susceptible to that. Of course it is. The heart's also susceptible to its own vices too, right? And so they don't exist within each other, but we definitely live in a world where people all live in their heads. And they're looking for like a rebellion of a thought. And then you create an ideology and you run from one monster to the next. And it's this movie called The Lobster. And it's a recognition that people can never be free when they're constantly running. There's the monstrous institutions that tell you we can help you find love, right? You run out of it into the forest, and perhaps maybe there's a better chance at love there, but now there's no guarantee in the forest. But then when you recognize this in the forest is also another group of loners, people that are okay to be alone. They don't need the couples retreat to find love. And at the end of the day, both of them are still running from death. And that's clear in both of their narratives, but one functions to destroy the other, but they're the same. And Colin Farrell's character is able to recognize that because he does find love in the forest, but then he recognizes that he's not allowed to have love in the forest because they've adopted the ideas from the institution that they left from, which is actually being together is bad because that's what they learned. Isn't that interesting? That they saw the couples retreat that was there to get people to be together. And then they now made a whole thing that's saying anything like flirting or sex, things that bring people together, you are going to cost you your tongue, or they will have larger consequences.
Mm-hmm.
You then later get to see those consequences in the film for being caught loving. So they create their own ideology. And it's more people that are disconnected from their hearts. And yeah, they expose the institution that they had before, but they also expose themselves to the same evil that they have unconsciously because they're not forgetting where the monster really is. And so eventually him and Rachel Weisz's character run out into the real world. And there's tragedies that has befallen her. And she was blinded by one of the loners' society. And the most compelling part of the film is a recognition of, does love have to require you to cut off a part of yourself to be with someone?
Mm.
And because she lost her ability to see, he's there in the bathroom of a diner with a knife pointed at his eyeball.
Mm.
And the movie ends.
The Lobster.
Yeah, one of the best films I ever watched.
I've never seen it.
A24 film.
No, of course.
Not an A24 film.
Oh, never mind.
It's that guy did a lot of A24 movies. I forgot what the director's name.
Wait, is it the same guy that did the
Killing of a Sacred Deer?
Whale? With Brendan Fraser?
I can look it up.
Okay.
I can look it up.
Actually, hold on. I need to look it up right now because I've. Oh, Yorgos Lanthimos.
Huh?
Yorgos.
Yes.
He did Poor Things.
Poor Things.
And
I'm gonna watch that.
You haven't seen Poor Things?
No, that's on my list. That's an immediate list.
Incredible.
He's one of my favorite directors.
Yeah. Poor Things. Yeah, watch Poor Things. You're gonna have like 8 videos to talk about of content to talk about Poor Things.
Oh yeah, I look forward to watching it. It'll be Saturday night. I'll give it a go. Get some pizza.
Ooh.
Yeah, eat a whole pie. And do
Pizza
that a lot.
pie.
I eat a whole pie, like a beast.
Really?
Yeah.
From where?
Go to like Prince Street Pizza Wagon.
Oh, Prince Street.
Joe's Pizza even. I go crazy.
Have you gone to something dough? Dough. I'll look it up later. Really good in Studio City.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of great pizza places. Yeah, what I was able to recognize is that people who think that they can find love, not recognizing what love is, will leave them to their own vices with the dogma that made them run in themselves as they take their own eyes in the name of love. That's not love. And so you could say that you could establish that these things or these institutions are corrupt, but if you can't find the corruption that you have in yourself, you're always left to your own vices.
Mm-hmm.
And you will be the one that does take out your own eyes for the person you love, meaning that it was never the institutions that kept you hostage to begin with. That was just the story you told yourself so that you didn't have to face the monster you are.
Mm.
And so I just watched that and I was genuinely really, really moved by it. Yeah, I'm just talking about, an evolution of a dimension of myself, and it is my heart. And that's where all my strength is.
Mm-hmm.
A strength of the unconditional love that I believe that we don't believe we have in ourselves is what disconnects men from their strength. is that they see unconditional love as a form of weakness. And that's the weakness of the man.
Why do they see it as a form of weakness? Because it's vulnerable?
It's the most vulnerable expression. It is sincere. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that a mother's love exists the way that it does.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you hurt me and I'm bleeding. And you hurt me because of something you had internally. It was a reactive hurting. And you see its effect and you run. But as you run, it's not, what did you do to me? What's wrong with you? It's, Jake, are you okay? Why are you running? As you're bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
No, but it's real. That there's a certain kind of concern that is real that a person could have for another person. And this is what it made me realize, that most people like to play that card like as if they have it yet. It takes the most selfish of people to be the most unconditional.
Mm.
And it's like, well, why? And it's like, well, because that's the strongest form of love. It's where Hercules dives into the depths for Helena, and it costs him everything. What happens when he emerges? He doesn't just become a demigod, he becomes godly. And that's what it is to love. What it is to love is to be godly.
Mm.
And love has wisdom that can teach you something about your strength. You want to listen. And it's your heart. And we have a story, and the story is, love runs from me. It's like, no, you run from love. You run from your heart. And your heart has wisdom to teach you. You just don't believe that you have that within yourself. And there's something interesting about diving into the depths of what your heart has to offer. It will redefine your definition of strength and will give you the very thing that you've sought your whole life. And that's the sacrifice of Isaac, to take the thing that you love most, right? And to give that up means that there is a truth that exists outside of reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that truth that exists outside of reason is love. And the thing about discovering a truth that exists outside of reason is you need to start interacting with things that aren't in your head, which is all reason, because your reason is limited. And your heart could expose you to dimensions outside of your limited reason that could change your life forever. And it can give you a strength that you've sought, that you never thought it would ever be. And because if you really start thinking about a courageous person, is a person that it's attributed to a characteristic of the heart. It's a courageous heart, it's brave. And there's love there. And it's the masculine understanding of it. And everyone needs that courage. And there's definitely a deficiency in that in our culture and our stories. And it's been one of the things that I've needed most, because courage is the ability to leave the institutions or to leave the world that you've known and to walk out into an empty desert. And if it's not a desert, it's a mystic woods. It's to walk into something that has no guaranteed outcome. And then that just somehow takes everything that you've experienced in the negative sense and gives it a meaning. You remove that, then the negative part of existence, the looming cloud, the dark twilight that's lingering, the divided world, becomes nothing but a prison. To feel it would immerse you into your life, and it immersed me into mine, to where the melancholy and the pain and the grief and the loss were no longer things that I experienced as a primary form of control. They became secondary to the primary focus, which is the adventure of my life. And they bound me to it. To think that the hero or the warrior doesn't find themselves on the road, sat before the campfire, looking at it crackle before his eyes, and recognize that he left a home. Maybe the home was taken. Maybe there's people he lost. There's something about that that's bounding. He's alone.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not. He's alone with himself, and he's alone with something. The stars no longer speak to a void. It speaks to a unity that person has with all of it. And it is as expansive as it is, because that's the space of your soul. It's that expansive. It's never ending. It knows no limit. And so throughout the process of an adventure, that everything that you were running from was the very thing that you will come back to at the end of the story. And that's what you call like the hero's arc.
Right.
And it's removed from a lot of our stories and our cultures, and it diminishes people's connection to life and their ability to make the courageous choice to live as they are, to live as who they are to become. And they have a limited understanding of what that is. And as they continue to do it, it expands. And so that means that the one thing that is essential in every person's life from the day that they're born to the day that they die is courage.
I wanted to bring something up because I have some friends who they have this tendency to, and it's very very present in a lot of people, but they try to sabotage their own love so that, and it's a way to it goes back to vulnerability, the thing that we were talking about with Carly. Why do people sabotage the presence of, an opportunity to love in their life before it even happens?
Mm-hmm.
I've just been hearing that a lot recently, and
I've been experiencing real healing, and I understand how damn difficult that is to answer. Yet I recognize how important vulnerability is, because it's something you extend to yourself with you.
mm-hmm.
So you bring into the light the very thing you've hidden from others in front of the people you love the most. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And what that's revealing of is a truth of your existence and of existence. So it takes the subjective and objective and unifies them through reality, through life.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredibly healing. So we have stories that we tell ourselves. We have experiences that shape these stories. And there's a certain point where we seek to confirm our biases because that keeps us safe. And it was something I actually heard from one of my other videos. I was impressed that I said that. And it's interesting to say that, like, when I speak sometimes, I don't know who's doing the speaking.
Right.
It's definitely something bigger than me.
Yeah.
And I recognize because it speaks to me too. Literally.
Yeah.
And it speaks to me in hindsight too when I hear it or whenever I write. I come back to that and I'm like, I wrote that. And why is it we push something away? And it's like, well, the familiarity of what you know is so comforting that when you start to get close to somebody, you will make the situation something it's not as a reaction because of something that has happened in your past.
Is it
So it's like the opportunity to come closer is really a recognition of my desire for truth. Do I want to see that? Because if I know that I have that, then maybe this can be real. And so we have to kind of think of something this way. Like, we have our internal hallucinations. You can call those our own internal projections. And let's say we're both hallucinating. We both have partial hallucinations. Absolutely. It's partially what immerses you, by the way. Because you could say, well, that's also what makes you feel like there's a deeper level of meaning. But what if that went overboard and you became unintegrated and everything became a hallucination and objective reality became something you avoid as you increase the strength of the hallucination? And so now you think of an intimate relationship as one. Here's an intimate relationship that's going to heal, one that's good for you. It's not a confirmation of the stories that have happened in the past. It's a story you've never experienced. And it's no longer, you don't have the alternative to walk away. And I recognize that with my friends, because you're talking about your friends. But I'm sure we're sharing this, and I'm sure she's having it too. And it was like, you're going to have to really learn to stand in front of the light with the thing that you've hidden your whole life in front of the people you've loved the most in order to experience what you've rejected about yourself. Because what I found was very interesting is that you act like these parts of you haven't been seen by anybody. No, they have. You just haven't seen them yourself, and you're experiencing your relationship with it, not them judging you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important. Well, because now you're developing a strength with that. And so to simply put it is that there's a certain point where we almost want to live in the world. That's the hell we created.
Mm-hmm.
We like it there. We like the fires of it. And it's like, well, here's something interesting. If I develop vulnerability, which is really the ability to face what you're mentioning and to see how my own projection of my own past experiences is shaping this again. And in fact, I've loaded this to end up right where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say, well, there's wounds, right? Wounds of what? Rejection wounds, disappointment wounds. Are they not going to play out with somebody you love? So the real question isn't how is this going to turn out the way that I want it to? It's how is this? Like, what is this? Is this the story I've had my whole life? Or is this the future? And if it's the future, then the world is changing. I'm changing. I'm healing. I'm healing from things that have existed my whole life that have haunted me. Like, most people speak for the other person before they even hear what the other person has to say to them.
Right.
And it's as a form of protection. And also, here's this. If I see you as this person, then I could speak you into that corner and then confirm that you're that person when you're not.
Well, it's a way of avoiding uncertainty, too.
Yeah.
And uncertainty's scary for everyone.
Yeah.
And
this is the unknown we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But imagine you didn't have any value system on top of that.
Right.
Well, then you're screwed. You're screwed beyond screwed. And that's what I noticed about the value system is, what are you committed to? And does that show up in your life?
So what would you say your values are? What's your value system?
Oh, definitely truth.
Okay.
Truth, growth, family. Love, play, purpose. God. That's a good one.
Yeah. Took you a while to say that one.
Yeah. Because that means you will immediately consider others.
You know what I think would be a really good straight to camera video would be talking about the how crucial the value system is in our lives.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea.
I think the values.
That's a great idea. I mean, look, we're just gonna let this go where it needs to go.
Yeah.
We could save that for later.
Yeah, definitely. But I think because every single thing in your life you do for a purpose. And is that purpose to get closer to your values, or is it to stray away from your values? And I think that would make for a really powerful video.
And I think the question of values is one that's becoming arbitrary, right?
Mhm.
And you remove story from values values become duty. That's a problem. One of the truths of the Bible is it starts in the beginning, and that's typically the beginning of all things, right? And I mean that's literally the first few words, and you talk about that as, and it's also the beginning of a story. And that's typically what people have adopted. In the beginning, there was once a little girl. In the beginning, there was once a boy, right? And in the beginning, there was a family, right? And what you're really talking about is something that has a creation point and comes to a finale, but it's something that lives with you outside of its finale, meaning that there's a story it contributes to, and there's subtle stories that exist within that. So what I'm really noticing is in this conversation is you can know all the things about humanity, but if the humanity is not anchored towards an ideal, it never really gets to flourish into the humanity that you initially believed it was. So humanity is the constantly expanding part of ourselves. And it's funny how we separate that from the soul, and we just go, well, no, it's the part that limits, it goes. And it's like, well, maybe it doesn't. It has a limited time frame. There's no question about it, but it's designed to continue, to expand, to grow. And it has the capacity to do so. And so you don't create like these kind of like splits that we spoke about in that other podcast that you saw.
Yeah.
And so we create like an integrated individual. And there is something very interesting about it, is that the process of integration is going to the places that have hurt you the most, consciously, voluntarily, at a point that you've developed strength, but also comfort in what you've previously understood. So it's a reimmersion to the very thing that has broken you, allows you to understand that to be true for more things than just that. So you're constantly expanding your consciousness, and that's what it looks like. But I was talking about the importance of values, right? So integrating back to the purpose of vulnerability. Why would you adopt vulnerability? Let me explain how stupid that is. It's psychologically ridiculous. It is the most ridiculous thing that you can ever do. In fact, it's so ridiculous. What it's like saying is looking down the barrel of a gun that you look down at and pull the same trigger that you did that blew your brains out, that you had to put back in your skull and refortify. You're going to do it again. That's how ridiculous it is. That's how much resistance you're going to feel to it. Now, this is also something very interesting, is that your prior wounds also create a story where they happen again, especially if they're in childhood, especially. And it was, I mean, I have definitely a very interesting story about talking about this one girl I met at a cafe, and she had like a lot of sexual shame, but she couldn't help but play with herself all the time. And it was funny, like 50 minutes of the conversation, we're talking about that. Because also something interesting about revolutionary conversation about a world that's dying about its humanity is that human beings never speak the way that they speak on the fucking internet. That's not how it works. It never speaks that way. The movies that you see that actually speak to you are the movies done by some of the greatest people in the world who are the greatest artists in the world, not about people, who have an ability to show you how human beings really interact because they themselves walk around with it. And they're fucking insane people. They look closer to insane people than they do to normal, or by whatever your idea of what you can talk about. And so 15 minutes in, we're talking about her masturbatory behaviors. And I thought about it for a second. She was like shocked. She's like, it wasn't like what I thought you thought you were going to like jump on the bait. Like, no, we're talking about your relationship with your body, your sexuality, your emotions, things that are really damn important. And she tells me, first she goes, isn't that inappropriate? I said, no, it's not. And she's like, okay. And then she continued having the conversation because we were both curious about what this really meant. And so there's a reason why I brought it up. And it was, she told me that she just broke up with her boyfriend. And I said, okay, interesting. We're talking about this. What was the reason? Sexual. He'd always reject it. And I said, interesting. And I said, now let me guess. It turns you on when somebody says, don't do that. Because you think that it was just that. There's a lot of nature that you have about you that you didn't quite understand that was also rejected, and it feels good now.
Mm-hmm.
You like it. And then she immediately was like, holy shit, you're right, I do. Like, I can't even receive someone saying, you want to play with yourself? Let me watch.
Yeah.
She'd run from it.
Yeah.
She's used to prison. We're used to it. And that's a sexual prison right there. And now maybe she would go ahead, well then, if I do it with a guy I don't love or respect, then I'll be free. Not really. It's just the same hell. You had to just like reduce your own awareness of where you're at. You're still in prison, you know? And so now I recognize the importance of these values is much more than just your current understanding of reason. And that's why I think one of the first stories is of Abraham and Isaac, right? A sacrifice so great that is defiant of the very thing that's got you here. Right? No, this whole journey was about you making me a great nation. And now the son that you promised a great nation through, you're telling me to kill?
Mm-hmm.
What'd I miss?
Right.
And it's like, well, what you missed is a truth about reality that exists outside of reason that you don't quite understand yet. And there's a vulnerability that Abraham creates with God. And that's the really real embodiment of love, which is this is not the same story of the past where you need to kill it or you need to blind yourself to love me. You need to be willing to show me that you will. And you need to make the right choice.
Mm.
And that's what I noticed about love. Love seeks your own betterment and the evolution of everyone. It does not seek you taking your own eyes to be with the person you love.
Mm-hmm.
It does not require you to kill your own son to have him. But it's the process of the extension of it. It's reaching out the knife to the thing that you value most.
Mm.
And then you get to see what God has. And he'll show you his love. And it will challenge everything about you. And so it's one of those experiences to where we could feel it though. You know, and you could talk about how did Abraham do it? It's like, well, he had a connection to it. And it's the same thing. It's the same voice. And it's said to do something like that, but that must not be the case. I have an understanding of something outside of that that is to be true. And I have faith, right? And so you say, well, faith is also it's definitely heart-oriented. And it doesn't mean that it lacks logical substance. In fact, it's sometimes the only appropriate logical response to something we don't understand. In fact, it's a necessary logical response to something you don't understand based off experiences in the past that show it's transcendent by nature. So that's what it is to be vulnerable, to take the thing that you love most and to put yourself in that position that you would least expect yourself to be in. But you're exposing yourself to a higher truth. And so I kind of get it a little bit more, right? Which is, it's not there for you to take the eyes out of your own socket, using the lobster analogy, or it's not there for you to kill your son. It's there for you to recognize what has stopped you from being free. Because when you find yourself in that position, really what you're recognizing is something that has existed throughout human history, human sacrifice. And, well, this God's no different. He's telling me to do that. You could have your old story that goes, yeah, he's just like every one of them. Just wants you to just kill your own existence. Sacrifice that to me. That's the only thing good enough. You see, it sounds the same, but it's different, right?
Yeah.
So I recognize this interestingly about intimate traumas, which I've experienced a lot of. You know, in an interesting world, I've experienced a lot of the cultural traumas around sex and intimacy. And that created no safety around sex. It created no connection around sex. It created a disconsideration of other people wherever there was sex. And so eventually sex became something that was tremendously difficult to interact with because it was never conscious. And no one ever considered people consciously when they have sex. And they would even use things like the word fun. And then eventually fun becomes meaningless. You want to know how you create a beautiful relationship? It better be fun. And so sometimes you'll hear the same things. But if you open up to the emotional dimension of yourself, you'll feel something contrary to it. And then you're like, wait, is this just another God that wants me to sacrifice to the human sacrifices? None of the things in the past show that to be true. Nothing with that particular person, you see, I'm using this for also a human relationship. Nothing with that particular person says that that is true. Then who is this? What's this about? Well, this is me. This is every single fear that I have in relationship to it. And you're telling me that how do you set yourself free from the fears? Well, you bring them up to the surface and you release them. And so it's interesting because I've always experienced this with women is that, you know, wherever I'd be intimate with them, it could even be a week,
Mm-hmm.
could sleep with another person. And I was like, whoa. And growing up, that was the culture I was in. And it
Right.
was very, very heavy at a certain point of time. Now I'd say after 2020, there's been a serious split in the people who have sexual access. So you have a extraordinarily, predominantly promiscuous people and then completely and totally shut down.
Yeah, I agree with
And
that.
beforehand, it was just everyone had free game.
Mhm.
And so it was also free game of your own internal prison that was just being manifested and applauded. And so you could even say the best thing that ever happened was what happened during 2020.
What is it about 2020? I mean, other than COVID and restrictions and everything.
Oh, I mean, it's a great Twilight, right? It's a Twilight that broke out. It's
Yeah.
so much loss, so much sadness, so much recognition of what was under the surface. The very thing that people were anticipating, things were too good. Things were too good.
Yeah.
And that's typically where you go, is that a storm I smell,
Mhm.
right? That starts to get cloudy and and the sun hasn't been seen for months. And
Right.
It has an effect on people. But that's also a representation of the human spirit evolving, right? And so now we have much more than just our understanding of what we were. No, what we really are is coming up, and it will challenge you. And then you'll go, well, that can never be love. Let me run from it. Let me find a party. Let me find a place. Let me be with whatever group is bigger.
Mhm.
And then you start the whole run from God thing. But to think that if we're godly, then there's going to be a constant evolution of the very thing that we understand as God and how we see ourselves. And that's going to constantly progress because crisis does that every time.
Yep.
And you could say, well, the biggest revolution in mankind was after World War II, as that really changed people's relationship with themselves about what was possible human beings can do to one another.
Yeah.
You started recognizing and reading the books that have happened to survivors during that period of time. I mean, look at the fact that we can stitch people back together and give them an antibiotic when we had to saw off their legs. Like,
Mhm.
that's clearly a product of things that are good that came from that evolution. But to think that you're not going to have a godly foundation is exactly where you're wrong. So tying this right back to values is a recognition that values that are true remain to be true in the face of the most extraordinary darknesses. Things that remain to be true exist under the most extraordinary crisis. And that's also what I recognize is that in the face of the crisis, it doesn't create a conviction. It creates a deeper connection to them. And a real crisis, let's be real, dissolutes the ego. And I've noticed that the biblical value system, the one with the stories that helps you connect to them. I just gave you a biblical story about Abraham and Isaac. Like, do you think that was my first understanding of it on the first read? No, it felt dogmatic.
Mhm.
But then as I separated from the institutional teachings, I read it for itself. But I couldn't do that until I understood how the ego functions within the institutional teachings. And so you could think of it this way, that the theological dogma that's taught to people is not biblical. It's the manifestation of people's unaddressed humanity. So you could reverse multiply it. And you could recognize what it's really saying about human nature. And then you're like, okay, well then now I could see the source.
Mhm.
I'm no longer looking at it 3/4 blind, but I'm going to act like I am. And I'm going to read in between the lines every time. And so there's a certain point where a value system starts to emerge and a recognition of a truth that exists outside of reason. And there's a certain point where we are challenged beyond measure. And to think of one of the highest values you can have, which is love. And I felt that, when I said God, and there's a whole thing about the Christian notion is that love is God, God is love,
Mhm.
and I feel like love is God is better than God is love because then it's a part of God.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it would be reductive to say God is love, not love is God.
Mhm.
And I feel like that would really help people expand their relationship with it to recognize how they've made him one thing when they have limited understanding of that thing they've made him into. You put him in a box, so
Yeah.
are you.
Yeah.
And so this is the truth of values. And it's like, okay, you're going to be putting yourself in the exact same position under the exact same circumstance, yet something's different because you can look back and realize that this circumstance is not playing out the same way. So what are you secretly attached to? Well, you're attached to the narrative that it's the same. You ever think about the courage of Abraham? Abraham is the embodiment of a hero. He went for himself. And if you ever really think about what kind of heart he had, well, he had to embody that in a circumcision of the kind of relationship that he wanted. And you could even say, well, it's kind of an insane person. All right, you want this covenant? Cut your penis.
Mhm.
And you're like, of course that was the first thing you said. You get what I'm
Right.
saying? Like,
Yeah.
of course that was the first thing you said. Because that's the most terrifying thing that you could ever ask of anyone.
Yeah.
And he does it. Him and his camp. And it's It's knuckle biting.
Yeah.
It's knuckle biting because you're recognizing what love really is and how deep of a challenge it is. And so maybe he's believing in this thing called love. And that's the adventure. The adventure is a search for it. And you could even say that a search for love leads you to the same place you started with you. And there's an adventure in love that doesn't leave you the same, but does take you back to the very same place that you started.
Mm.
So Abraham goes for himself, and it's an adventure, a tremendous adventure. He fights wars, he conquers, he expands, he develops a people with an understanding that there is this God. Not many people are aware of what he's talking about, but they could feel it and they understand it within themselves. It caught quick, and it made him grow.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also something very interesting about value systems, is that they don't exist without the stories that allow you to really connect to them.
Yeah.
And the problem with the this is the thing to do is not that that's a problem. It's that you can't remove it from the foundation of the stories that allow you to understand that as the thing to do. And so now you start having these things work with each other, ethos and logos. And now you're like, okay, I'm getting this. So in the face of that open-heartedness, there's an adventure without a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
Yet through the process of that adventure, you could start recognizing a higher truth outside of the story you've told yourself that has grounded you up to this point. We're attached to it. We love it. We love that idea.
Well, we love to create stories of how things are going to happen.
Right? And now it's like, well, what about the story of how things are?
Yeah.
That's a healing one.
We don't live in that story. We live in the other story.
And that's the danger of a person who's unintegrated, is that
Mm-hmm.
they're constantly living in the story that's not true of reality, that misrepresents themselves, and by the way, closes the door to that very thing and pushes others away who open that up.
And it's interesting because that's our way of trying to protect ourselves, when in reality it's doing the opposite.
Yeah, when in reality it's doing the opposite, right? And so you have to be courageous to face that very thing. And it's going to feel like David standing before the Goliath, using another biblical metaphor. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
This is the importance of courage. And the importance of courage opens up somebody to their heart, and their heart to recognize the truth of the matter, right? And now I find that so interesting, is that there is a commandment to love your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and all that you possess. It's to love. And I found that very, very interesting, because then it gives a nuance to loving your God unconditionally, and then don't listen to what your heart pours after. And I found that to be interesting, is that it uses the heart in both ways, but it also gave a nuance to dimensions of you that you could be unaware of, that are working against that very love, that you confuse for love. This is a 4,000-year-old text.
Yeah.
So when you're in the face of the person that you love, you're just kind of left to that recognition. This is a loving force. And I mean, like, you could feel that.
What if you can't feel it, though? What if you can't recognize that because you're so hurt from previous experiences?
So this is what I recognize about love. If you believe that it's too good to be true, you don't believe that you can give it.
Mm.
And you probably don't. You have a limitation, a condition on what that is, right? So I recognize that it's like, if I were to see the very thing that I seek, and I wrote it down for the first time, because a lot of people think that the love that they're looking for, they actually know how to receive. If it's the love you're looking for, you don't know how to receive. You're the embodiment of that thing you're looking for. That's your purpose. And how you know it better than anybody. You have the negative image.
Right.
And it's like, well, you think about how you flip a negative image. I forgot what it was, but you initially see things in the negative, right? And that makes sense. And all you have to do is flip it. So there's maybe the conscious effort of that very thing that you see, and spending more time with what it really is. And you can kind of go, well, maybe it's this, right? And that's conscious effort, is that it takes the thing and puts it in order of how it really is, right? Because to say that, everything is upside down because the retina sees everything upside down, and then the brain converts it to right side up, right? And then you're like, well, no, things aren't really upside down. It's how you see them, right? And so that's exactly the purpose of discovering that truth. And I've recognized that a value that I believe everybody needs to have, that they're not courageous enough to have, is the value of truth. Because it might show you the story you tell yourself for the first time.
Yeah.
That it means it's going to get very dark. And, we all have a story. And sometimes it starts as a kid. And maybe it was a tough relationship with your mother, or your father was never there, and that you could never feel safe. All those things are real. And then those stories play out in high school with your first girlfriend. And then maybe it's that no woman could ever love you for you, or you can't love a woman, or whatever it is. And then you start seeing it play out in the relationship. And what does it do? It strengthens it, right? And then you're like, oh God. And then it happens again and again and again until eventually you become a prophet. And now your ego is having a heyday, right? And it's like, well, look, see, you're predicting these things. Now find your soapbox and speak to the world.
Did you ever see that movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once?
No.
Oh, shit. I'm going to text you that also.
My family is divided with that movie. I have those that love it and those that hate it. And usually when that happens, I agree with both.
It's talking about the exact thing that you're talking about, though. It's an incredible movie. It talks about every single possible story that we could have had, or we would have had, if, say, you didn't meet that person at that time, or you continued doing your fitness journey and you didn't start coaching.
Yeah, I just had a dream about that last night. That's so wild. I had a dream where, I was in the midst of my old life with an old ex-girlfriend in my old house, doing my old job.
Yeah. Scary.
And it's a nightmare. Yeah, I didn't feel a nightmare because my relationship with that has changed. That's what healing is. That's no longer a nightmare. Then what is? Well, it's the newfound progression of yourself. It's going to reveal itself as a negative image. And then you'll face that too. So the one consistency throughout our lives that we're always going to need, and we talk about a value of courage, right? Well, that goes along with faith. So in the process of this conversation, I get to get more familiar with those values, right? And now to have the conversation around the things that you don't quite understand gets you connected to what you believe. And you might not believe the things that you would like to. When people, I have a value around family. It's like, no, you have a value around security. And family gives you security.
Right.
So, okay, well, I have a value around security. Well, what kind of security? Well, then now you would have an understanding of God, because what you're recognizing, if you take that deep enough to the point where you recognize that every single form of, well, security from what's the real question? From death? Your heart could stop right now. That's a real thing. And your brain can go, it is. Or you could take a piss one day, get bitten by a rattlesnake, and that's it. And that's a real situation. That's possible, right? Probable is a different question, but we're talking about possible. And the brain plays with possibilities, especially when you send her a text message. Maybe she's just like your ex, right? So we're going to need to incorporate the deviant dimension of you that you didn't want to face. That changes everything about who you are too, because there's a certain point where you get to see the monster you are and you run from that love, to then recognize that love is the very thing that a monster can do, that a monster receives. So you see, it's like, okay, well, you ran from.
Yeah.
And you run back.
Yep.
And you're not the same. And I believe that if you really want to see somebody's true strength, it's their capacity to love. And their capacity to love could only be seen as its sincerity behind it, the purity of heart to sacrifice oneself at one point. I never believed that I had that in me. And to think that that's the very thing that I wanted. I wanted to know the love that I've always wanted my whole life was a love I was too afraid to address, because I kept facing the fact that this would always happen, as that there would always be a survival response, that nobody wants it as much as I do. And you can kind of see that it's starting to eventually turn into a little bit of that makes sense, until eventually you're blowing yourself, like sucking your own dick, just so you don't get that confused. And that's exactly what happens. And then there's a certain point of consciousness where you recognize it and you're like, whoa, my God, what am I doing? This is not reality. And there it goes. Then you're not living in accordance with your values. Now, how is your life progressing? Who are you becoming if you're not changing? It's the real question. And you're becoming no one if you're not changing.
Yeah. Scary.
So I've been finding a lot more importance behind getting people to see their humanity and then recognizing what they believe in the face of it. Even if you're real, you can expose yourself to dimensions of you that want otherwise. We've seen that in the story. It's like it's a person who goes back on the betrayal that they had, right? And I'm trying to remember one of these stories, and it typically looks a little bit like this. It's where a guy is hired to, kidnap this one guy who ran away from their ever hometown. And this hitman or this bodyguard finds that person that ran away. And throughout the course of it, they develop a really intimate relationship with one another. Oh, there it is. Emperor's New Groove. That's the movie. And so it's a story about, the llama stuck with the village guy that he swore to destroy. And they both need each other because they're both stuck.
Yeah.
They're stuck in the same pit. separated from home, but with different beliefs. Isn't that interesting, right? And there's a certain point where, the Lama is able to recognize, he gives him up. He gives up Pacha. And it's a betrayal story, and it's horrible. And then as he's pretty much on his way to his death, the hoof cap grabs his hand, right? And he's like, you came back. And he's like, well, I realized what I really wanted.
Yeah.
And so that's a redemption story. Well, that's also, not everybody gets to experience that. I'm talking about a Disney film, and I felt like an emotional, like, shotgun to the soul.
Yeah. Most Disney films are, honestly.
Yeah, they really are. Emperor's New Groove is one of my favorite films because it talks about transformation of a character and an evolution of understanding for both people. And that's a real healing journey. It's the truth of the matter, not two people's internal truths against each other. You have to incorporate that truth because that was true then, not now. So now you're no longer hallucinating, are you? You're healing and building and integrating a new relationship that's better.